Hi everyone, welcome back to Current Affairs Unfiltered. I'm your host, Paige Fullman. The Illinois primary is literally right around the corner. The Illinois primary is so early compared to other states. It's March 17th, and every other candidate I've talked to in other states, I always ask, like, hey, when's your primary so I can make sure to get this out on time? And they'll be like, oh, it's in May, it's in July. I'm like, okay. So we are in a mad dash to get Illinois candidate episodes out and into the ears of people. This week, we are going back to the 9th District, which is a district that touches a little bit of Chicago, but mostly rings in some northern suburbs. And we are going to be talking to Sam Polan. Sam grew up on Chicago's North Shore and learned early that service means stepping up and solving problems. He served 9 years in the U.S. Army, 5 in special operations, rising to captain and deploying to the Middle East 3 times, including joint time with SEAL teams. After active duty, Sam served at the Pentagon, advising the Joint Chiefs, NORAD, and U.S. Northern Command. After more than a decade of nonpartisan service, he was tired of seeing politics reward performance over progress. Sam is running for Congress to bring a new generation of leadership focused on integrity, accountability, and common sense to rebuild trust and make government work for everyone. And I first met Sam when I went to a candidate forum, which is where a bunch of candidates show up and just kind of debate, but talk about their policies for a while. And I was very intrigued by what he had to say. So many candidates I've spoken to have previous government experience and are stepping up to a new call to service. And Sam is very different than a lot of the candidates running in the 9th District, and a perspective that I think is worth listening to. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Sam. Sam, thank you so much for being here. It is great to have you on.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's start with where you were in January of this past year. You were working at the Pentagon when Trump came into office. Can you talk a little bit about that moment and how it shaped your view of public service and government accountability?
Sure. So I was working at the Pentagon. I worked for NORAD and U.S. Northern Command. I was a policy advisor, strategy advisor as well. And I was actually writing a lot of policy, part of the J5 Directorate, which is the policy writers. When the president came in, he issued just kind of a whirlwind of executive orders overnight that took effect as soon as he took office. And, one of those was drastically rewriting how we handled the southern border, the roles of the military. But then on top of that, that was the introduction of DOGE and, how they were going to restructure, kind of reshape various departments of government, but especially the DoD. So, we were caught, we knew changes were coming, but we were caught kind of, let's rapidly read through all of these, let's dissect them all, let's break it down. What are the actual taskings? Which parts are hyperbole and which parts are actual orders? And we had to really kind of separate that. We had JAG look at everything. And then we kind of started making plans. So my role, still, as a senior policy position, and I was tasked with helping to kind of rewrite the southern border policy and what the plans were for that. However, I was also still a probationary employee. And for people that don't know, probationary literally just means when you signed up. It's a probationary period. There's no, I didn't do anything wrong. There was no ill actions I took or anything like that. So it was just literally just a status of timeline. So we start getting reports of DOGE, and they're trying to get rid of probationary employees. They're trying to get rid of people who politically don't fit their mold. And it just became very, very complicated. It became very stressful. I give the people I worked for a ton of credit because they were very proactive. They also said, and this is coming from, multiple star levels that are saying like, hey, these are our people. We take care of our people. We're not going to let some outsiders, we're not going to let some 23-year-old outsider tell us who we want or who's capable of doing this job. These people have been here, so I give NORAD a lot of credit. They, to my knowledge, they didn't let DOGE fire anyone in that organization. Other organizations were not that lucky. And that was kind of a case-by-case basis. So I had a lot of peers, a lot of people I knew, people incredibly qualified getting released from the government for, signing up at the wrong time, which is just no way to run a country. And going back to your question, it's, it creates questions of who is going to be in these positions. It creates questions of, putting loyalty above duty is not who we are as a nation. That's not what the Department of Defense or other aspects of government are supposed to do. Uh, Government positions are supposed to be as apolitical as possible. They're supposed to be consistent. They're supposed to stay through different administrations and really keep the government running. So what happened in January is we had this huge brain dump, this huge experience dump, and just losing thousands of people who really know how to keep the government running and really know how to keep things moving, all under the guise of we're trying to save money and everyone's, government employees are ripping everybody off. So, it was stressful, it was tense. I give my organization tons of credit for being professional, but like I'm not going to say it was an easy time to be there. So,
Right. Well, that's a couple things going off of that. I will never understand the thought by a lot of the public that government employees are these hacks that have to, be on one side or the other, and they have to be pushing, some sort of ideological, whatever it is. Like, and maybe it's because I know government employees that take their oath seriously, and the oath is not partisan. So
right.
I struggle so hard to mold what I know and what I've experienced with what so many people say of like, well, they have to be, leftist shills. They have to be, whatever it is. Like I can't square the circles on that one, but it probably is just, again, based on my experience and your experience. Like,
Right.
that the people working in the government are not leftist hacks and part of the deep state, but like, it's so hard to get the average person who doesn't know a federal employee to understand that.
Right. And I think, especially being in DC at the time, I think there's such a divide of like, everyone in DC understood what was going on, and city was like the bleakest I've ever seen a city. But then you come, to go somewhere else or talk to someone else who doesn't work in close proximity to the federal government. They're kind of like, oh, the government could definitely save money places. And I don't think anyone disagrees with that or has ever disagreed with that.
Right.
And government absolutely wastes money. No one's like, that's just a
Right.
fact. But this, almost demonization of federal employees was just mind blowing because, like you said, we all swore an oath. I worked with people who voted for Trump. I worked with people who voted for him twice, and like we never had any issues. Like it was always professionalism. What we cared about was doing our job and getting the mission done. Like they didn't care that I didn't vote for Trump, and it's just we worked together. We respected each other's military service. We respected each other's federal service.
Right.
And such a huge majority of federal employees have some sort of military background. So it's crazy this juxtaposition of we love our veterans, support our veterans. How come veterans can't find jobs? And then we're going to fire entire branches of government. It just made no sense at all.
Right. Right. And thinking about what you said about DC being bleak, I was out there in February of this
Oh
year,
yeah,
and I was staying in Navy Yard, and I was like, the vibes are
they're off.
it's not what I remember it being when I left here 6 months ago. Like this
Yeah,
is when I was there in October, it was a time of joy and whimsy, and I'm here 4 months later, and like the vibes were just
yeah.
not there. Like it was noticeably bleak.
And how can you blame the people? Like everyone's going to work every day not knowing if they're going to be fired,
Right.
and it's like arbitrarily fired. And then there's all this talk about, is this legal? And passing the sniff test, no, but who's standing up and
Right.
doing anything about it? And then that's
Right.
that's the whole other issue itself is nobody pushed back on any of this, and that's what
Right.
it it created such an like environment of hostility that was really just disheartening to see, and just the experiential loss and the institutional knowledge loss was just it's mind blowing, and it really can't be overstated to people because it's just these people have worked through administrations. They know how things work. They are truly the most professional people in their field, and yet now we don't know who's running what, or people are saying, hey, how come this is still going, or how come this hasn't turned on, or you get stories
Right.
of people still getting paid months later, and they're like, well, the person that would have checked that was fired, so I don't know what to tell you. Like,
Right. Right. So you've worked inside these systems that most people are only seeing headlines about. What
mhm.
have you learned about how the government actually functions behind the scenes versus what is most misunderstood from the outside?
That's a really good question. Kind of like my immediate thing is I go to when people talk about they, or they say, like that's what they want you to think, or that's what they're just telling you that, and it's like, we are the they. I was the they for many years, and there is no
Right.
deep state they. Part of me sometimes is like, if the deep state is real, I'm a little offended they haven't introduced themselves yet. I've had, 12 years of qualifying service. um, but what people really don't understand is that it's these are just professional people who want to do their job and live their life, and they are truly, truly patriotic to the country. This myth that it's people just collecting a paycheck and don't give a crap about anything. It's just not true, especially at the higher levels. It's like these people could be doing a lot of things. There are, even in the military, there's such a collection of like higher education for these people that can be making, tons of money in the private sector, doing all these other things, but they choose to do what they're doing because it gives them purpose, it gives them meaning, and they really believe in what they're doing. So a lot of times it is like a 9 to 5, but then when you kind of take a step back and take a big picture look at what you're doing and realizing that your decisions and these conversations you're having will have effects on people in this country, but also overseas, and will affect our allies, will affect our adversaries. It's really, sometimes you have to kind of reframe and reset. And one of the things that kind of just is like a cultural thing is that, we stay relatively calm, and people don't go crazy about the little things, because like going crazy doesn't help anything. But then also there are so many just bigger problems out there that people really need to understand that, cooler heads do prevail, but also professionalism wins the day. But also, you know, this political divide, it doesn't exist in these organizations. It really, really doesn't. It's people who just want to do their job, people who want to protect their country, people, who took an oath, like you said, and actually care about what's happening here.
Right. Right. I've never met of all the federal employees I know. I don't know a single one that is so outwardly partisan that they would ever let that get in the way of what they need to do at work.
Right. And truthfully, like that would be identified as a problem very quickly by like
Right.
multiple people. So that it's just, yeah, this whole idea that this threat that internal employees were trying to threaten the government or undermine the Trump administration, it's not true. Like
Right.
but they needed a justification to, let Doge do their thing. And then, the demonization kind of spirals, and you start seeing crazy information online. And, people even know, talking about how, well, the federal government employees, they don't do anything. They're just ripping people off. And it's like, me, man. Have I ever, have I ever seemed like that type of person?
Right. Right. So you were running in Illinois' 9th district.
Correct.
When Jan Schakowsky announced that she would not run again, what was it that made you say, yes, this is my time, I'm jumping in?
So that is, it's a collection of things. And, going back to your original question, I was in the Pentagon in January. I was here with the new Trump administration, and things didn't get better as we were going. They continually got worse. And
really, you don't say?
Continually got more hostile. But ultimately, what it came down to is, I think right now we are at a huge inflection point in this country. And I think now more than ever, we need the right people in these positions. We need people who are willing to actually fight back, push back, but also just use common sense. And, for lack of a better term, we just need adults back in the room again. We need competent, professional people back in the conversation, having these, making these decisions. And, for me, kind of one of the things that I learned very early in the military is that if you see a problem, you don't walk by it and leave it for the next person. Like it doesn't matter if it's a piece of trash. Like the idea is that it scales up to like an enemy patrol. Like that's just the mentality. If you see something wrong, you deal with it. So that, for me, that really rang true. And so in this situation, I'm thinking, I kept waiting for Congress to do something while I was being threatened every single day. I kept waiting for Congress to push back on these executive orders or these tariffs that are going to hurt people, and which I don't think we've seen the full effect just yet. And I figured, we need the right people. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to step into the ring. And the 9th district is where I grew up. My parents are still there. My brother, no longer in the 9th, but still local. This has always been home my entire career in the military. This is my home of record. This is home. This is where I always came back to. So, what a stars aligning that it's your home district where this opportunity comes up. And really the big thing I learned, especially, it's a big world out there, is that, you don't get to pick when these hard things come up, and you don't get to pick and choose the moments that come up. And it's really just how you react to the things that happen around you. And that's So this was it. This was, and it wasn't out of the blue. I had some encouraging people, some government people, some sitting members, some former members, and some organizations who are really committed to getting the right people back into office, who really kind of guided me through it. And ultimately, I made the decision. It wasn't an easy decision. I really, really, truly loved my job. I loved what I was doing. I felt purpose there. I loved my coworkers. But, I think right now, the biggest opportunity to make a real difference and really get this nation on track is by putting the right people in these positions that can actually push back on the executive overreach, push back on the tariffs, push back on this demonization of federal employees. So it's a fight I'm willing to have. It's a fight I'm not going to back off of. And truly, I feel like this is the best way to serve my country right now.
Right, absolutely. And I mean, at the end of the day, we need more fighters. Like this, I didn't choose to run for office, but I started this silly little podcast where I had this goal of educating people and making a more informed electorate. Like, we need fighters on every level. Like, yes, we need new people in Congress that are
Yes.
willing to stand up and use their voice and use the levers that they have access to. But like, even on like the personal level, like we need people in the streets. We need people going
Yep.
out and organizing. Like it's so important at every level to show some sort of resistance.
I completely agree. And I'll just say I'm incredibly proud of this neighborhood, this district, the city, just for pushing back on this ICE situation. And look, I'll caveat with our border situation was out of control in the last administration. We need to be very honest about that. And, it was a problem. But what we got was, a 180 full steam ahead into some pretty chaotic situations, and then some, you know, extrajudicial activity that, I don't think anyone was happy with. But I'm really proud of the way that this community pushed back on that. Like you're saying, they took to the streets. Someone asked me like, who's been the most influential organization? And, there's been a lot of organizations that have been pushing back, but like truly what I've seen the most is just people leaving their house, going outside, recording, making their disapproval known and really like doing their part, even at whatever level they possibly can. And it's inspiring and kind of funny in hindsight. But when you see people out there who they're like, I don't know what I'm doing out here, but I know I'm supposed to be out here. And those are the best people. And they're like, I don't even know what to do right now, but I'm out here recording and getting my neighbors outside. And I think those are the best people.
Right. Well, that's what, like, when the chaos, like, really started to come down towards the end of the summer, like, and God bless, I haven't seen it yet, but I made a promise to myself that, like, if I saw somebody being detained by ICE, I would stop and I would record. And I haven't had to do that yet, but, like, that was a promise I made to myself of, like,
Right.
I'm not just going to be the person that goes, like, bummer, like, gotta keep walking to work. I gotta keep walking to Sweet Green to get my lunch. Like,
Right.
no, I'm going to stop and I'm going to make it known that I am a citizen of the city and I don't like what's happening.
No, and that's wonderful. And that like that's something everybody can do. And that's
Right.
you don't have to lead a march. You don't have to write a protest song and make these inspiring videos. Just go outside, make your presence known, exercise your First Amendment rights. Like that's what makes change. That's how you reach critical
Right.
mass. It's just when the majority of the population disapproves of something or just wants a drastic change. And I think I don't want to do political science in a term, but like I think the collectivism we saw is really inspiring. And I think it's hard to do, and it's when a population genuinely believes something is when you see movements like that happen. So really, really proud of this whole area, this whole district.
Right. So let's move on to some of your policies. You
Sure.
have said that the American dream is alive, but the economy is broken.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on what that means? And what do you think it would take to make that opportunity feel real again for working families?
Sure. So my father started a business here in Skokie, and he didn't come from a ton of money growing up, but he had an idea. He worked hard at it, and I mean, holy hell, he worked hard at it, and he proved you can build something with an idea and hard work, and he did that. He took a loan and started a business. So that's why growing up, seeing it firsthand, seeing it grow, people still wear the T-shirts that I went to high school with, which I think are great. But it's not easy. It takes hard work, but it also we need to recognize that dream is not the same for everybody. And also, there are people in America who don't have the same access, don't have the same system literacy required to actually pursue these things. And it's also a cultural thing. People, if you ask people how they view loans, some people think, oh God, no, that is the end all be all. That'll ruin me financially, and other people see it as an opportunity. And that's a system literacy question. But we need to recognize that the system in place right now definitely favors certain groups above others, and anyone that says otherwise is just being disingenuous to the real conversation. And it's also shifted. Affordability has radically changed in our lifetime. As a millennial, we were told, do a good job, go to college, work hard, get good grades. You can buy a house, support a family of four on one salary. And just like, there's nowhere in America that you can do that. And it's not even close. Uh, but that's what we grew up being told, right? And, the big problem we see is this middle class that continually shrinks because there's this 1% that's now like a 0.25% that controls majority of the wealth in this country. But the middle class keeps getting smaller because, these people who are coming out of college or coming out of even, trade schools or, trying to move up in the world, there's such a gap of just well-paying jobs versus the affordability in this country right now. So you get, just an example, you get kids coming out of college who are $150,000 in debt, and they're getting offered jobs that'll pay them $70,000, and that's a good scenario coming out of college. And then you want them to pay $4,500 in rent for a one-bedroom apartment and like not even have the conversation about buying a house anywhere. Like that's just completely a pipe dream. Then you stack on increasing medical costs. And then something that I wish young people understood, and I'm not that old, but like I really wish I told my younger self, but also people coming out of school, food, drinks, going out is so damn expensive and it catches up with you so fast.
You sound like my boyfriend. He's always railing against the food, drinks, and leaving and drinking out of the house.
But I also believe that like you should be able to have fun. You should enjoy your life. And
right.
it sucks because like people are in these no-win situations and, they could do the right thing. And I think one of the most frustrating myths, and I'm sure you've heard it too, is that whole avocado toast bullshit.
Yes, like, of course. How could I ever forget it?
And they're like, don't buy your avocado toast and you can buy a house. And it's like, yeah, in like 1915, sure. Like, right.
Right. Right.
That's not the issue right now. So I say, go enjoy your avocado toast, go drink your beer, but just also just kind of the back of your mind, that is a real thing. But fundamentally, being a little more cautious about your day-to-day spending isn't going to fix the economy. So what we really need to do is like really address predatory loaning, people taking advantage of people in dire straits, but also taking advantage of young students who, again, we're told, go to college. That's what you're supposed to do. This will make you a successful American. And, I believe going to college is a great opportunity, but there are other things, and like trade schools. I think trade schools are such an underutilized thing, and we need people who are willing to do all sorts of professions. College isn't the end all be all. I'll never bash anyone for going to school. I have 2 degrees. I'm not going to be a hypocrite about it, but there are so many other opportunities, but also just, we need to address expenses. We need to address predatory loaning. We need to address healthcare. Groceries are going to keep going up because of the tariffs that haven't fully hit yet. And, the housing situation, I think Americans being able to buy houses or buy properties or anything like that, I think that's the fastest way to build equity in this country. I really do. Not on the crypto market. I know the internet tells you, quick trips, you can make 25 grand, and they all show their Bugattis, which are rented, and there's bullshit videos. But there are, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Of course I do.
There's tons of like things the federal government can do, which, Congress can help and protect, which are, first-time home buyer credits, helping create legislation that blocks developers from buying huge tracts of land or areas and just making these development homes where they can fix the pricing and essentially price people out of communities.
Right.
The Airbnb, not just them, but like the home rental flipping market really created a huge problem for like supply availability of homes because you have people owning multiple homes. And, you balance that with capitalism, like, yeah, it's the right, but sometimes the government does need to step in and say, hey, this isn't working for everybody, and we need to do better about, leveling the playing field and making it more equitable. Like you mentioned, The dream's not dead. It needs some work, and it's certainly harder for other groups than some groups right now.
Right, right. Well, I'm trying to save to get a condo in the city. And the
Stop
only
buying that toast.
reason, e- exactly, well, please hold, because the only reason I am able to save my money to get a condo in the city is because I live with my mom. And
Right.
I did the math. I was like, okay, like, what if I got an apartment now? I quite literally would not be say I'd probably be saving $100, maybe $200 every paycheck, as opposed to the 800 to 1,000 I'm saving now per paycheck. Like, the difference is drastic, and the only reason that I am even thinking of buying a condo is because I'm living with my mother at the ripe age of 26.
You're
It
you're
shouldn't be
not
that way.
alone.
And
No.
I know I'm not alone, but it shouldn't be that way. And I know that too.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And I'm sure it's frustrating for you. I'm sure it makes you a little jaded towards the system sometimes.
Just just a
Just a bit.
smidge, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
So you've seen firsthand how systems of enforcement such as ICE, Border Patrol, national security agencies, how they operate.
Hmm.
Where do you think is the line between protecting the country and what is essentially violating civil rights? And how do we kind of strike that balance for those that think that at this point we're a little lopsided on where the balance is falling?
Yeah. And it's a hard question. And like, you know, something that happens to me all the time is if I'm critical of an ICE activity or critical of some sort of law enforcement, that immediately turns into the whole, the way the internet works is, oh, you don't support police, you hate the troops. And it's like that's not even remotely close to what I'm talking about right now. So, you know, it's hard. Police have a hard job. ICE, in some degree, I feel for them. Um, in some degree. And they have a job to do. A lot of them, I know there's a lot of volunteers right now, but some of them don't want to be here. And the National Guard sure as hell doesn't want to be here. I know that for a fact. But they have a duty, and local police also have a duty, and their job's incredibly hard. But, you know, one of the things about a free and fair society and like ours is we are inherently, just by nature, going to be less secure because of our civilians have freedoms. But that's not something I would ever change. I would never ever trade that away. I think everyone's rights is what makes us American. I think our protections under the Constitution is what makes our country special. It's not the bald eagles and American flag Budweiser cans. It's the fact that we had these brilliant people put together these protections in a time where that was just unheard of and completely revolutionary idea. But they also warned us about it. And I think it was Franklin, I'm going to butcher the quote, who said, people who sacrifice freedoms in the name of security will have neither and deserve neither. That's paraphrasing, but the point remains. If people are comfortable letting certain groups of the population be detained without cause, having their Fourth Amendment rights violated, or the state of Illinois having, the 10th Amendment being violated, when they're superseding states' rights or states' laws, like that's a real problem. And that's not something we can turn a blind eye to. And, it's hard, and it's going to take some real work to correct it. It's going to take a lot of congressional oversight. It's going to take, God, I hate when you say it, but it's like there's going to be subpoenas forever, and they're going to have to interview everyone, and it's going to take a long time. But I do think we'll get to a point where we get some actual justice and clarification, and real consequences, because we've all seen the videos of just these ICE agents just pepper spraying people arbitrarily, firing pepper bullets, being aggressive, and that's a training issue. That's a professionalism issue. So those people inherently make it harder for everyone else out there who's trying to do the right thing and trying to do their job correctly. And it's the same thing you see with police, or one bad cop becomes a reflection point of every police officer in this country, and that's just not fair. But to your question, the line is moved, and it's moved to a point where this outward aggression slash half the country celebrating people being detained without cause, it's mind blowing. But it's a cultural question at this point, and I think we really need, again, to change the culture, have the right people back in office, build trust back in the government, because right now that's zero. And everyone wants to talk about how much they disapprove around here, how much they disapprove of the president or disapprove of his policies. But it's like, you also look at Congress, their approval rating is worse. And it's like, that should be a moment for self-reflection for everybody.
Right. The building trust back is something a lot of candidates that I've had on have spoken about that I think is so integral for what happens next in
Hmm.
2028 and beyond, is that getting that trust back is like step one for what comes next.
Yeah. And I really think a big problem part of that is just this tribalism with party lines, and people who go to Congress and only vote along party lines, and it's just you're a wasted seat. There's no reason to be being there paying accepting a paycheck at that point. It's you want trust. It's represent your constituency, represent the people you were elected by, and you were there to represent, not whatever the party leadership wants, because that's not your job. Your job is a representative in a representative government. That's what the job is. And people want transparency. They want to know that they're heard. They want to know that their interests are at the forefront of any congressperson's mind, because it's not about the party. And we have these divisions that are just getting wider every day. I think we need people willing to step up and say, you know what, no, like this isn't good for anybody. This isn't good for my constituents. This isn't good for Americans. No, I'm not supporting that.
Right.
Or hey, I'm going to vote for this because yeah, it's a Republican bill, but you know what, screw it. Like this needs to happen right now.
Right.
That said, I don't agree with what happened the other day in the Senate, but
Well, that what I
but
was going
there
to
this
say, go
yeah,
on.
there are certain situations where it's appropriate to work with the other side, but this was not one of them.
Right. Right. What I was going to say is that the to your constituents thing is so important. And what I was going to bring up was that Dick Durbin turned his phones off in
Oh
the
God.
run up to that vote. And my mom she's a boomer. She's a lived up boomer, but she was mad at Dick Durbin because he had his phones off. She was like, what the fuck does he think he's doing? If people are calling
Right.
off the hook, don't you think that means you shouldn't vote for it? I was like, talk to him.
Right.
But it is so important to listen to your constituents. Like,
Yes.
if I understand, again, I disagree with the vote that happened, but like, I understand the thought process of like, we need the pain to end. But like, if Dick Durbin's constituents themselves are calling him off the hook to say, don't back down, what, like, I'm confused on why he wouldn't want to take those calls or hear from those constituents that have that view.
Because of blind party loyalty. And
Right.
I have
Right.
nothing but respect for Senator Durbin, but blind party loyalty. And
Right.
he lost the plot. And it's not just him. It's so many people in our government, so many people in Congress who are just, you know, the Republicans control the House, they control the Senate, they control the court, they control the White House, obviously. But like, it, I don't believe Americans should ever suffer based on government's problems. And that's a whole other conversation about how shutdowns should never happen, frankly. But this idea that, well, this is good for the party and we just won an election, and we can use it to leverage this, and it's just like that's not what people want. It's not what your constituents wanted. That's not, and it's played out exactly the way we thought it would. Republicans are claiming
Right.
victory, and the Democrats are banking on a promise by Mike Johnson and Donald Trump, which is like, come on, dude.
That's like, those like cartoons where it's like the angel on your shoulder and the devil on your shoulder.
Right.
That's like they took a promise from the devil on their shoulder that notoriously never
Right.
has the right answer and expected a
Right.
different outcome.
Definition of insanity. Like that's,
Right. Right,
we
exactly.
know how they're gonna go. Like the person's been obsessed with killing Obamacare for his entire career because it has a name Obama. Like we know exactly how that's gonna go. And it's like,
Right.
I don't know if you saw Jon Stewart this week where he fired up the Schoolhouse Rock video. And it's like, do you guys understand the process right now? Like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
let's say somehow you do win the Senate. Somehow you do win the House. It still has to go through that guy.
Right.
Like use your
Right.
head. Jesus. Like,
So, in our initial phone call, you told me that equal opportunity doesn't mean equal outcome, which I agree with. How do you translate that idea into policy that addresses those inequalities?
right. So, this kind of goes back to the idea of the American dream. Like, I think everyone has every right under the law to exercise, their free will, exercise their ability to build their lives, live the way they want to. Self-determination is such an incredibly important thing to me. But I think, people often conflate this idea of handouts versus hand ups. And, let me be a nerd again for a second. It gets down like the deep psychological level of like Republican versus Democrat. And just, this is anecdotal, but like this idea of when they view fairness, it's different. So this, the Republicans traditionally view this as a handout, like, no, I didn't get a handout, so that's no longer fair. Whereas the other side views it as, no, there are systems in place, there are realities in this country, in this world that makes it harder for certain people to get advantages. So here is a hand up. And I think there's a huge dichotomy there that people, at a core level will never fully agree on. But I think a lot of it is kind of controlling a narrative, controlling the messaging, like you said, and controlling how people actually understand it. Because like equity and equality are not the same thing. I learned this example from a coworker. You got three soldiers, they all need new boots. It's like the average size is size 5. It's at like theirs, they all get size 5. Like, that's equal. Equity is you get them all the right size boots they need to do the mission they need to do. So
Right.
it's really, it's more of a messaging thing, but it's also recognizing that there are programs that help people get an equal shot or an equitable shot in the situation. And that's really what it's about. I don't believe in welfare states. I really, truly don't, but I do believe in social programs that can help people, give them an advantage when they really need it, and, help with that upward mobility. And because, it's a purely, no welfare state is just anarchy, and that's never going to happen. You're going to see the worst in human nature. We have a lot
Right.
of great laws that happened from labor unions and things like that. And Dad's going to hate that I said that. Kidding. No, but it's, there is a line, and that's part of governance. It's sacrifice. It's also, compromise, and realizing that not everyone's situation is the same. And we need to help people the way that they need help in that moment. And
Right.
that's not something that needs to last forever. But if there's someone out there who just needs an extra little hand to get up to that next level, to make that dream come true, to, get out of a horrible situation, then like absolutely the government should be willing to help out. If, your neighbors can always help out, but I think the government has the resources and the power and the access to actually make those things happen for people.
Right. Right. Well, my whole gripe, I guess, with the general public not liking the social safety net is that you and me and most people are much closer to needing the social safety net than ever being a millionaire or a billionaire. Like, you are more
Right.
likely to need to use food stamps or WIC or Medicare or Medicaid than becoming the next Elon Musk. Like,
Right.
that is the reality.
Yeah. That's a result of several failures from the federal government, but it's also just the world as it exists. The economy changes, the markets change, and
Right.
like that safety net is a safety net. It's not a support. Like it's not a like a stool to stand on. It's a net that keeps you from falling. And it's like that's how you have to look at it.
Right.
It's a safety mechanism,
Right. No,
because
absolutely.
economies can spiral, and it's for the good of everybody. And I think that's a really great way you got to pitch it. It's like this helps everybody.
Well, right. And even if you never have to use it, then you're lucky.
Right.
And if you do have to use it, then you're going to be pretty damn thankful that it was there to catch you on your way down.
Right. And it's just these misinterpretations and this whole thing with the SNAP benefits. And the reality is like most SNAP users are coming from areas that predominantly voted for Donald Trump. And it's just like
Right.
it's the message is lost. And that's such a huge thing that we keep kind of losing sight of, is this like this narrative that has lost control. And we've lost sight of what actually matters in this country. We've lost sight of the things that actually make us better and stronger. And this identity of community that we used to have, and it's like proud to be an American, like that's shifted into a weird, almost unrecognizable thing.
So let's move on to more foreign policy. The
Okay.
war in Gaza is something that has deeply divided both the Democratic Party and also the country. How do you think the U.S. should approach this moment, both morally and strategically?
So going to start with saying that the entire thing is a human tragedy. This conflict's not new, and I the realist in me doesn't think this will be the end of it either. But I think in this moment, I think the United States really has a big opportunity here to gain some credibility back on the world stage, because right now we are hemorrhaging credibility. We used to be the kind of the guiding light, the city on a hill of the morality in this world, and we were the ones that could do the right things, and we had the power militarily, economically, to actually push our will and push the things that we thought made the world better. So right now, Gaza is flattened. And from a security standpoint, it is absolutely the international community, including Israel and the United States and all the Gulf partners in that area, to rebuild, to make sure that Gazans have the things they need, have the resources they need, have the infrastructure they need to actually build their society back up. Because something I learned a ton about in the military as a civil affairs officer, you learn what breeds insurgency. And starvation, lack of resources, lack of opportunity, those become feeding grounds for terrorist recruitment. So if we want to stop these conflicts, it is absolutely critical that we rebuild and give Gazans an actual shot at having a normal life overseas. And that conflict bleeds into the entire region. Hamas is a subsidiary slash proxy for the Iranian threat network. So is Hezbollah, so are the Houthis. And if you look at this conflict as just Gaza, it's naive, but it's irresponsible. This is a much bigger conflict, and the Iranian regime, the IRGC, they will take every opportunity they can to keep sowing that division and keep that conflict going. And it's such a tragedy because they fire those rockets and they know exactly what the retaliation will be. And I'm not going to absolve Israel 100% on everything they've done, but it's if you look at it from a point of view where human nature, it's just this tragedy that's going to keep perpetuating itself. But it is such a complicated place, and to really answer your question directly, the U.S. has a huge responsibility right now in the peace process and the stabilization process. I think stabilization is the fastest way to a peace process. People aren't going to just decide, what, one day we're all friends now. It's not going to happen.
Right.
And we need to remove the opportunities for groups that we don't agree with and terrorist groups to recruit and continue sowing that dissent and creating chaos, because, the absence of order, there's chaos. That's just how it works.
Right. That was one of my bigger frustrations when everything was kind of heating up in the Middle East over like the spring and summer, was that I was trying so hard to say, like, we're not going to see the ramifications for what we have just done until 10, 15, 20 years from now, when there's this big implosion of terrorist attacks and people go, oh, I wonder where those came from.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe we should look at that thing we did back in 2025. Like, it's very hard to explain that we need to deal with this now so that we're not seeing bad things a decade from now. And that's a hard thing to sell to people.
It really is, because first of all, our attention span is so short. And it's not just Americans, it's the Western world in general. In American politics, we view problems in 2-year sets because of election cycles. And that's just not the right answer. And that kind of, that's again, back to the division that exists in our country, just makes that worse. But you're absolutely right. It's, these problems where those terrorists or freedom fighters, those are being created every single day, every bomb strike. And, I was fortunate enough to see General McChrystal this week, actually, during a Veterans Day event. And he was talking just one of the lessons we failed to learn in Vietnam, we failed to learn in Iraq, we failed to learn in Afghanistan, is that you cannot kill every terrorist. And all it does is create more problems. That's not how you win a war. You will never, and this is crude, and this is, it's coming from McChrystal, who's he had quite a background in special operations community as task force leader and things like that. And he's just like, you can't kill your way out of these problems. Yeah, people are going to get killed. That's the reality of it. But we need to have grown up, realistic conversations about, foreign policy, but also, building up who were once adversaries. I think the greatest thing we ever did was rebuild Germany and Japan, and now they're our greatest allies. And it's a long time. Imagine the animosity Americans felt towards those once enemies right after the war.
Right.
But that's the long term you're talking about. It's I think our huge problem, especially in government right now, is that we have just lost the ability to have a long view. We have lost the ability to see problems for what they are and recognize what our long-term goals are. Right now, it's just, and our adversaries cheer it on when we're tearing each other apart over the stupidest things in the news every single day. Like we've lost our way. And this goes back to we just need new people. We need new decision makers. We really, really do. And
Right.
we need people who understand the world has changed. Um, Things are changing. It's gonna get more complicated. It's dangerous. It's gonna get more dangerous. Like this is not the time to do the same thing.
Right. Well, and I've said for a while now, the biggest disservice that Democrats specifically are doing to the American people is not acknowledging that if and when Donald Trump saunters off into wherever he's going to saunter off to,
Yeah.
the biggest disservice is them not acknowledging that you can't just go back to the status quo.
Right.
Like there's no like he's going to saunter off and then we're just going to reopen USAID. We're just going to, rehire the people that I'm sorry, but like that's not going to happen. Like
No.
there is going to be big conversations and big upheavals of things, and to not prepare people for that reality is doing a disservice to everybody.
Absolutely. Completely agree with that. And my biggest fear is, say, Democrats reclaim the House and the Senate and the presidency, and then they just make this massive pendulum swing back the other way, and then, creates a huge reaction back the other way. And we keep just doing this back and forth of chaos. And it's like, we got to stop doing that. We got to come together. We got to figure out what it is about our country that we all love, that we all agree on, because I guarantee
Right.
there's things out there we all agree on still. And
Right.
we got to get out of the tribalism, because like you're saying, it's such a disservice to think that we're just going to go, yeah, that was a pretty crazy dream, right? Like, yeah, let's get back to normal. Like it's not.
What a crazy 4 years that was. Well,
The envelope has been
unlock
pushed so
USAID.
far. Yeah. And, speaking of USAID, like you talk asking US responsibility in Gaza, it's like, wow, we had an organization that would have been absolutely perfect for that. And now we don't. And it just shows how narrow-sighted and, short-sighted
Right.
this administration really be. It's just there's what's happening right now. There's no talk about what happens next month. And it's just
Right.
it's kind of a scary time, but it's also an opportunity, because I think and this is me being optimistic, what could happen after this administration is we have some serious conversations about constitutional reform and putting up some serious guardrails and introducing new laws about transition and transition authorities and who controls what, and really kind of peeling back a lot of this executive power and it's not just Trump. Executive power has been growing since the 40s, and just keeps getting more and more aggressive, and they're kind of swallowing up the other branches. And, the founders wanted Congress to be the first among equal branches. That was their design. And it's like they keep conceding power to the executive every single election cycle. And we need a kind of a hard reset. And that's not going to happen overnight. And that's going to have to be a cultural shift. And that's going to have to be a brand new, not just brand new class in Congress, to the point where it's like everyone's kind of going, all right, this isn't working and this is not sustainable for the next 2 decades. And we need to have the hard talks and have the hard conversations and make hard decisions that not everyone's going to love, but, for the good of the country.
Right. Absolutely. From your perspective, as somebody who's worked in defense and policy, what do you think is the biggest misconception that Americans have about our role in the world right now?
That is a good question. Um, there's a lot. And, when I first joined the military, well, before I did, I had always planned on it after 9/11, but I had a high school teacher who was he was an Air Force veteran. And he told me something. He's like, you can do all the research you want. You can study everything you want. You will not understand it until you're there. And that is so spot on. And that's the advice like I give people signing up. It's like, you'll get it when you get it. You'll understand when you do. It's a culture. It's a world that exists in its own. But I think what the American people need to understand, especially right now with this call back to like this isolationism, which we know doesn't work and just creates more problems and creates a power vacuum. The world is not typically a nice place. And the United States came the power it did by doing the right thing and taking the actions and doing the hard things when it needed to do. We often glamorize World War II. Like, it was a hard, vicious, bloody war that consumed the entire planet. The West came out on top, and the United States capitalized on that. So I think people who think we can just back out, and there's a common thing I'm sure you've heard before, like, we're not the world's police force, and that's fair. But we do have a certain responsibility, because we have certain capabilities that no one else does. That we it is a big part of our role is to keep the world on track in the way that we see as a fair, prosperous, and free world. That's the old school in me, grown up political science student, but that's truly what I believe. And I think most people in the military and the defense genuinely believe that. People in defense believe we have this moral responsibility to protect things that are bigger than ourselves. And that's right now, it's the US and the world stage. That's every soldier in basic training who, for whatever reason, they signed up, they still signed up, and they still took an oath to protect the country. Because fundamentally, at some level, they all believe that there are things bigger than them that are worth protecting. And I think we need to get back to that. I think we need to get back to a long view of a bigger picture of the world and really understand hard things are hard. And that's, things don't happen overnight, and warfare is bloody, and warfare is hard. And, we can't just tell people to cooperate, because when we get into situations, especially with climate change, where you're going to have situations where populations are fighting each other over water, over food, over power, they're not going to negotiate over those things. They're just not. And I think we need to be prepared as a nation to react to that. And, part of our responsibility is keeping our allies. Part of being an ally is, it's not us versus you, it's the collective versus them. Like, that's what being an ally means. So this whole demonizing our allies for not paying enough, or not doing this, and we're not doing ourselves any favors on the world stage right now.
Right. And going off of that, what kind of leadership in your, like, as you're on the campaign trail, as you're talking to voters, what kind of leadership do you think people are hungry for right now? Like, is it being a fighter? Is it simply just being the adult in the room? Like, what's the vibe you're getting? What are people after?
I think it's both. I think, it's if I had to describe my leadership style in two words, I'd say I'm an optimistic realist. I like to see the best in people. I still have faith in all of our systems. I still have faith in democracy. I still have faith in the American people, our neighbors, that we genuinely want to do the right things. But the realist side of me knows that there's times where you need to put up or shut up and actually fight back and push back and make hard decisions. And, being the adult, like, that means taking responsibility when it's called for. It means keeping a cooler head. It means staying calm in chaos. The last thing we need right now is more performative, false outrage, and just, feeding algorithms to make problems worse. That just, with the goal of getting clicks and likes. Like, that's just not, it's not helping anything. So people I talk to in the district, they just, they long for precedented times again. That's,
I'm sick of living through unprecedented times, let me tell you.
People are just tired. They're jaded. They're tired. And I think most people right now are kind of somewhere in the middle on the spectrum, and they're saying enough, like, just enough of this crap. Can we have people who know how to do their job, who are responsible enough to actually do the things that they need to do, and have enough respect for the office, enough respect for the population to actually listen to their constituency and represent Americans, not special interests, not the extremes on the left and the right, but just like the everyday people who are just tired of grocery prices going through the roof, not being able to find a job that pays them enough to survive. Um, at fundamental level, Americans are concerned about their safety, security, well-being. Like, we can't lose sight of that. And we want to, virtue signal all day, but like, the reality is, like, we have to do our job and make Americans' lives better. That is the purpose of government, is to make American lives better, to make them safe, to make them secure. That is the social contract that exists between the American people and the government. We have completely lost that.
Right. No, I agree. One more little wrap-up question. If somebody listening is feeling, like you just talked about, a little disillusioned and just fed up with politics, what would you tell them to remind them why it's still worth caring and participating?
Because you're not alone, and we see you, we hear you. you're not alone in your frustrations. You're not alone in this feeling of, feeling jaded or not enthusiastic about the future. The majority of Americans feel the same way as you do right now. And you have an opportunity and you have a responsibility to help us get there. There are people here, there are competent people, there are professional people who are just now trying to break into this sphere because they're tired of it just like you are. So people are working towards it, but we could always use your help.
I have a dream that one day soon the whole slogan of, oh, both parties are the same, will be beat to death.
Yeah.
Because I think it is starting to become more and more clear, especially with the crop of people that are running in these 2026 midterms, that is not true anymore. Right. There are so many people that are sticking their neck out and proving that they are certainly not like Republicans and certainly not like the establishment Democrats that people are so used to.
Right. And, we have a two-party system. That is what it is. I know most millennials would love a coherent third party, or, going back to the founders, they warned us about parties, and here we are. And,
right.
We owe it to the American people to represent the American people.
Right. Absolutely. One little softball question for you. You are hypothetically going out to eat in the 9th district.
Okay.
Somebody asks you, Sam, where are we going to go? What's your top pick?
That is such a loaded question.
It doesn't, listen, I'm not asking you to tell me who's got the best service. I'm like, gut reaction.
So
You're tied to the 9th district. You cannot leave.
Where
are you going to dinner?
Just dinner. Okay.
Oh, okay. I guess it doesn't matter. Breakfast, lunch, whatever. If you got a brunch spot.
So my favorite lunch place is Mustard's Last Stand by Northwestern's Ryan Field.
Okay.
Like if you're feeling a hot dog cheeseburger, like it's such a just iconic little piece of Evanston that's just been there forever. And I have so many memories of like riding my bike there when I was in like grade school and, buying the hot dog and thinking you were so cool with your friends, and it's still there and it hasn't changed at all. So like for me, that's awesome. And every time I'm back here and you see it, and it just hasn't changed. And I think that's fantastic. So I would recommend Mustard's Last Stand to anyone who doesn't know.
Perfect.
Parking is tricky. So walk there if you can.
Everything, parking in Evanston period is tricky. Going there is like my worst nightmare. All right. Well, that is all I have for you. Is there anything that you feel like I missed?
No, this was great. Thank you so much for having me. It was really a nice conversation.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Current Affairs Unfiltered. At the very least, if you don't live in this district and you are not somebody that has the ability to vote for Sam, I hope this gave you a little bit of insight into what being a government worker, really means, and, what that looks like. I'm not a government worker, was never a government worker, but it's something that I care so deeply that people really understand, because I have friends that work in the federal government, and it's the dehumanization that has gone on is something that people don't get unless they've lived it. Sam and his team have been so kind, so nice, so generous and flexible with me, and I really owe it all to them for getting this done, and appreciate everything that they were able to put into this. And Sam would make a excellent representative for a district. I've been very particular with who I have put on this podcast from who's running in the 9th district, and that is for a reason. I wanted to have the ability that, like, when my friends and family and people I knew would ask, what are your opinions on the people running this race, that I'd be able to point them to my show and say, here's like X amount of candidates that I believe could be good representatives for this district. And Sam just embodies that so well. And yeah, if you are interested in donating to Sam's campaign, following him on Instagram, reading more about him, please check the show notes. I will have those linked there. And if you do live in Illinois, make sure you get out and vote in the primary on March 17th. And also, if you're not sure if you're registered to vote, go check that. Make sure that's all settled and well and done. But I will see you guys next week. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, or share it with someone who could use this information. And as always, if you have questions, topic suggestions, or just want to say hi, you can find me on social media at Current Affairs Unfiltered Pod on Instagram, or send me an email at currentaffairs.unfilteredpod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Keep asking questions, stay engaged, and remember to be nice to your local federal worker. I will see you guys next week.